Hi, I'm Jameson Newlander, Alan Frog from the Lost Boys, and you're watching the Frog Brothers podcast.
Let me get 'em!
It's refreshment time, folks.
I'm just gonna go watch a movie.
Do you like scary movies?
I don't watch movies.
I have to return some videotapes.
You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. Don't need a TV.
Books, records, films, these things matter. Call me shallow. It's the fucking truth.
Over 1,600 titles, each for rent at just $2 the first night, and only
Finish him.
I don't watch TV.
Yeah, but you are aware that there's an invention called television, and on this invention they show shows, right?
It's a Laserdisc.
Okay, I want channels 18, 24, 63, 109, 87, and Weather Channel.
Welcome to the Frog Brothers podcast with your hosts, Justin and Alec.
Recording in progress. I like that. So, welcome to the Frog Brothers podcast.
We have a special episode celebrating the 5th anniversary of Ghostbusters Answer the Call. Joining us are world-renowned Interdimensional Crossrip co-hosts Troy Benjamin and Chris Stewart. Welcome to the show, fellas.
Hey, how's it going? World-renowned. I don't know about that. Maybe like South Colorado to maybe the Florida Peninsula. No, it's
You're on the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
World renowned for Ghostbusters.
World Wide Web. Whatever that is.
Anglo-centric with a touch of German and French speakers in there, I guess, maybe.
I think you guys still have an Angel Fire website somewhere, right?
GeoCities. Yeah, that's Chris shakes his head. It's out there, and it's somewhere. It's gaining sentience, and it's going to kill us all. I just want everybody to know that. Just forewarning you. Okay.
In our reality, it's called Lycos, not Skynet. So, anyone have their email addresses?
Well, I mean, you never know. They've been changing the name up to, it was Genesis. You never know. The next Terminator movie, it might be GeoCities.
GeoCities.
That's great.
Genesis didn't have another name in.
I'm pretty sure it did, but I forget. They kept.
Yeah, in Dark Fate, it became like Sunshine or something like that. Like what? It's not okay. Whatever.
Is this a Mario game or a Terminator movie? I don't know.
The Rainbow Road will kill us all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Would be cool to see. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we're just here to chat about the 5th year anniversary of Answer the Call. I know there's a lot of hate for that in the fan community. I don't hate this movie. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. I've changed my thoughts and things on a few of the moments having rewatched. I just rewatched this over the weekend with my lady friend Liz, and she quite enjoyed it. And I shown her the original recently too, so she doesn't have a near and dear nostalgic stake to it like I do. So it was good to get a fresh opinion on it and just kind of get some fresh eyes to see if I'm crazy or not. And well, she must accept my craziness because she knows the stuff I have.
She still said you're crazy, but it's okay.
I think it's totally acceptable crazy, right?
I do remember coming over there and you guys were watching Captain Marvel, and at one point she described it as the movie with the green guys. I think she was referring to the suits that the Captain Marvel and Jude Law wear, not the aliens.
Not the Kree. The green suits, the Green Lanterns, those guys. The
Power Rangers, basically. Yeah. Their helmets off.
It's fun. Like everybody that's outside of the people that would listen to our podcasts, they're always like, it's okay, it's fine, I enjoy it, my kids enjoy it, or I enjoyed it, or like the amount of like. I saw a great post actually, and I sent it to a couple people. Ghostbusters 2's anniversary was a couple weeks ago, and one of the official sites put up like, Ghostbusters 2 came out on this day in 1989, and the first comment underneath it was like, this movie, though not as bad as Ghostbusters 2016, will go down as one of the worst Ghostbusters films of all time or whatever. And then I saw that Kurt Fuller, who played Hardemire in Ghostbusters 2, was like, thanks for tagging me in this because, who cares? It's crazy stuff. But yeah, there's all these people that they have to go straight to hating on Answer the Call. And it's like, okay, sure, it wasn't the best movie. It wasn't the movie that we all wanted or that, some people didn't want. it's fine. Yeah, it's.
It
I
found an
don't
audience.
understand the hate. Yeah, I don't understand the hate for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, actually, I just wanted to get all conspiratorial. I haven't watched it. A friend was telling me about it. There's an HBO documentary series that basically covers Russia's
hacking,
digital asymmetrical warfare. Yeah, that sort of thing. And actually mentions that there's kind of a hint that some of the early online hate for Answer the Call may have been backdoored by Russia, just sort of testing out how much you
just
could
those
push social
farms,
media.
seeing how they can antagonize. Yeah.
So because none of it felt like it measured up. Like online was just so insanely intensely against it, and then if you just asked a random group of people, you never found that one rabid guy, right? You found a few people that are like, no, I don't like it. A lot of people said, yeah, it's all right. And then a couple of people absolutely loved it. It's like, that is not mapping over to what we're seeing online at all. It's just.
No. Yeah. It's so weird how people choose to like take that negative energy. And you always want to be like, did you not watch the second movie? Because that's how you get to be revived.
This is how mink coats come to life and run down the street.
There's a podcast / YouTube channel I listen to, has one of the guys from Cinemassacre he used to be on Cinemassacre and stuff, and he runs one called Hack the Movies, and they just had one recently they did about Ghostbusters 2, and they just did nothing but talk shit on it for about an hour. And at the end of it, I was just like, it's funny because they made a lot of good points. I mean, in regards to it having some sequelitis and things like that are just like, you know how The Hangover 2 is probably the worst sequel ever because it is just rehashing the first movie. And Ghostbusters 2 is not that, but it definitely does a little bit. There's some things in there that are problematic that maybe I didn't notice as a kid, but like, I don't see how everybody, like some people think Ghostbusters 2 is straight up better than the first one. And that's just crazy to me. And they're the same people that, you know, a lot of them hate Answer the Call and think it's the worst garbage ever and it's an abomination. But
you kind of hit on the root of the thing when it comes to discussing Answer the Call. It's twofold. One is every movie will always be somebody's first introduction to the series. Somebody will have always seen one of the movies before they saw the rest, and it will be graded on a curve to them based on that. And then the other thing is that it's completely subjective. You can come at Answer the Call from any number of different ways. And it's not necessarily that if you dislike it or you think it has faults, you're wrong. I think where everything started to break down was when online decided it had to be 100% binary.
Yes.
It was either the worst thing ever or the best thing ever. And there wasn't a lot of room for wading in and saying, well, there's pros and there's cons. And then at the end of it, you just have to walk away going, why are we spending this energy? There are people that, I mean, we'll probably get into it, but my feeling is that every year that goes by, whether you liked that it won out over something more directly tied to, you know, Reitman and the originals, what have you, at the end of the day, it got made and it really did find an audience. And then it's hard to have these discussions because you say things like, look, it brought a lot of new kids. And I mean, literally, well, kids and adults too. Like we talked about this before, Troy. There's a whole segment of adult society that really bonded with like Holtzman and the rest of the characters and went, perfect, I love this. Yeah. But a lot of kids saw this first, and being kids, they're not like, but the rest suck or whatever. It's we haven't really covered this here. I'm melting, so if halfway through it sounds like I'm having a stroke,
the Vancouver heat wave is getting it, Chris. But yeah, you're right. It's like a lot of kids, their first introduction to Ghostbusters was the real Ghostbusters on Saturday mornings. And
right.
I'm guilty of that because I never saw the theatrical version of Ghostbusters until like 91, because I always had the TV version. It was the only version I was allowed to watch, but I watched the real Ghostbusters and I knew that inside and out. And I think you guys will probably want to talk about it, but like you can tell that Paul Feig and Katie Dippold watched and grew up with real Ghostbusters. And even Melissa McCarthy at one point, you know, mentioned that like, you know, real Ghostbusters was a staple on Saturday morning. So it's like for those people that watched real Ghostbusters and then come back to watch the original film, they're no less fans. They're they can discover things however they see fit. But same thing with Answer the Call. Like people, oh, that old movie with those guys from Saturday Night Live. Okay, I've never seen it. And then they see this movie, and then it turns them on to the previous films, and then hopefully also opens them up for Ghostbusters Afterlife that comes out in November, because it's like now they've been acclimated to proton packs and ghost traps and all these things, and it's kind of like their introduction to it.
Yeah, I mean, if a kid, and by kid I mean, let's say up to early 20 something, and there's a lot of that. YouTube is filled with a lot of kids doing like millennial first watches and all that online. So they're watching a movie now for the first time and responding to it as a 35 plus year old movie. That was like if in 1984 I saw Ghostbusters and somebody said, you should totally watch like Ghostbreakers or Scared Stiffs or something like that.
That old black and white movie with Bob Hope, the guy from the telethons,
right? Which I grew to love as I got older and started to appreciate older films more. But as an 8-year-old, I'm like, no, that's crappy old movie. Don't like. So I don't know. Answer the Call kind of. It is what it is. I mean, I hear a lot of people going, "Oh, Comedy Days sucks," and I guarantee you there was people watching Ghostbusters in '84 going, "Oh, Comedy Days sucks. Look at this movie." So,
yeah,
I don't know.
That reminds me of like one of my favorite scenes in Freaks and Geeks. We have a sound bite of it in one of our little stupid instrumental theme songs we do, and it's when Bill's talking to the gym coach who's dating his mom at the time. It's played by Biff Thomas Wilson. And he's talking about seeing stripes. And he's like, I hate that Bill Murray. He's such a wise ass. And he says, Bill Murray is the funniest man on the planet. That kind of just reminds me of what you're saying. Like, even the older generation back then, like they wrote that into there. And that's a Paul Feig thing. So it actually comes full circle.
Yeah. It's like the Gilbert Gottfried quote when he had Matthew Broderick on his show. Chris, you probably know this, and he's like, at the very beginning of the show, he doesn't even introduce him. He's like, Matthew Broderick, I need to tell you something. I fucking hate Ferris Bueller. What a little jerk that kid is. And he just lays into poor Matthew Broderick without even saying hello. But it's like that generation looked at Ferris Bueller and was like, man, this kid is just out of control. And Rooney is the good guy in this. He's not the bad guy. But our generation grew up and like, oh yeah, save Ferris. Ferris Bueller is awesome. Like I want to be that kid. Yep. So it's interesting. But anyway, what were we talking about? Ghostbusters. That's it. Yeah.
I mean, I think, I lucked out and had the original on VHS as a kid. I remember like it getting delivered by UPS. Like I must have just badgered my parents into it after watching real Ghostbusters and getting the movie. And so I had one of the unedited versions, right? I had the theatrical release, just the pan and scan to deal with. So, and I still love that better than Ghostbusters 2. Obviously, in my opinion, just my experience, number one's where it's at. But Ghostbusters 2, I get the nostalgic ties to go into the movie theater to see it, right? I remember like losing my mind and probably upsetting my parents in the theater when I just saw the teaser poster for Ghostbusters 2 on the wall at the little 8 theater cinema that we live by. It was like, what is this going on? They're like, no, it's like next year. And you're like, what do you mean I got a year? A year as my life is like 20 years in a grown-up's life.
Yeah. And that was the first you heard about it too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I never heard anything about it before. And then I remember, leading up into that releasing the Oprah episode that everyone was on. And my mom's like a big Oprah fan, just a sign of the times. And she's like, hey, the Ghostbusters are going to be on Oprah. Do you want to watch it instead of real Ghostbusters? And I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah. Like, I remember like being heavily disappointed, but I go back and watch that now. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. It's a good little PR piece leading up to the movie release. And then I think, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you saw the poster and then had to wait a year and maybe talk with your friends about what do you think it's going to be like? And then you'd see the Oprah, maybe a Starlog had come out or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
When they announced Answer the Call, it got dialed to 11 immediately and then held that like FM sine wave tone of chatter for like a year and a half until that movie got finished and put out.
And Paul Feig was really good about dialing people in too. Like through his social media, he was updating people on his Instagram, snapping photos from the set and of costumes and things like that. And
the pros that he famously showed off like the dimensions for. You're like, whoa, you're giving us dimensions for this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, and dialed into the fans like for any faults that you have with the movie, or if you want to like put on your dartboard Paul Feig's photo, you shouldn't, because the poor guy was really trying to involve the fans. Like you said, that first photo of the proton packs, then he released a second photo with the dimensions for people who wanted to build it. So, you know, it was kind of like we had the opposite of what we have for Ghostbusters Afterlife right now, where it was like, we're getting constant updates. We're seeing tons of photos. We're seeing all of these little details and things like that. And the movie doesn't come out for another year and a half. So of course our hype level is just like, oh, I'm thinking about what this does, and that looks great. And people start building the replica packs, you know, not having seen the film. And it was great. I mean, that ramp up that Chris is talking about was a whole lot of fun. Like just the anticipation and knowing that a new film was coming. And like Alec mentioned, Freaks and Geeks, like I loved Freaks and Geeks. I love Paul Feig. I had high expectations for this. I love Kristen Wiig. I love Melissa McCarthy. Leslie Jones had just sort of broken on SNL. So, you know, it was like, oh, I can see that. Okay, she might be a fun, you know, kind of counterculture element to this. And then Kate McKinnon, obviously, again, a big breakout star on SNL, but I wasn't quite as familiar with her either. Yeah, it was like, okay, sure. If you're going to try to recreate Ghostbusters and try not to completely rehash things, which is what Ghostbusters 2 always gets flack for, this is the way to do it. Recast everybody, give it a spin so that you're not comparing people to Bill Murray. You're not comparing people to Dan Aykroyd. You're not comparing people to Ernie Hudson and Harold Ramis. Sure. Do
you think though that giving the stuff that really only us as fans appreciated, as good of a move that was, do you think maybe it would have done better if they had tried to keep as much of it under wraps as possible, like Afterlife is doing? Because here's what I wondered over time is every time something came out, legit or not legit, the people who were prepared to just hate it immediately went to town hating it, and were met by the far larger, even though they said they were the majority and the masses and the keepers of all things Ghostbusters, and we were all wrong. Mostly just the smallest group and loudest. All they were met with was a bunch of reasonable people that the best argument they could put forth is, let's wait and see. And these people were never going to wait and see anyways. Like, how much better would that movie have fared if there was way less, all we did was generate, the news was negative, right? Every time something came out, the haters hated it. They got amplified by people trying to respond to them, but the best they could respond was just give it a chance, which they were never going to do. And then the movie came out, and a lot of it was already just kind of pre-decided. What would have happened if we had gotten to the movie came out, the haters then immediately went to town, but were met with, 10-1 by the people who also saw it in the theaters and came out and had an answer, which was, this was great, this was great, this was great, this was so. You know what I mean? Like, they had concrete responses.
Yeah, it was carrying so much baggage going into it. Like they
didn't have a null answer. They had a proper positive that they could argue to the negative, right? I don't know.
It's like that. No bad press is negative press or whatever, because you've got that whole concept of like, well, let's keep filling them up. But yeah, that's a good question. How would things have drastically changed in the longevity of this movie had there not been that kind of negative attitude just being given fodder to chew over and spit out immediately as soon as that was released?
Well, and I'm not bad mouthing Feig and all that either, because I think it obviously was a hard spot, and they made a call that wasn't necessarily wrong. I just don't think it worked out the way they were hoping it would work out in the long run. And like I said, I kind of wondered if they had chosen the other way, if it may not have worked out better. But
well, and it's hard for me to digest and like spread the message without sounding negative about it, is people are going to feel the same way about Afterlife. The problem is like we build these movies up in our head expecting to be our version of the third movie, and I'm not working for Sony. I'm not making that third movie. So our expectations versus reality is very.
I was about to say it's a big thing with expectations, because you see, when Answer the Call was coming out, when it was announced that it was a reboot, I was kind of busy with my personal life and trying to worry about what I was going to do with school and everything. I was in my adult life. That's the only time I was pretty much out of the Ghostbusters fandom and news for like a year period. And so I think
we noticed, and we marked you down for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real bummer. But my expectations were different than everyone else's, I think, because of this.
Yeah.
So when I saw it in theaters,
Yeah.
you know, again, I of course saw things that I didn't like, but I was overall like, hey, you know, not too bad. I even saw some, you know, I didn't realize, I wasn't aware that Bill Murray was even going to be in it, I don't think, when I went to see it. That's how much I was out of the news. So it was a good time for me. And then, you know, I had known about the kind of online talk a little bit about the hate and some of the stuff Leslie Jones went through, I remember seeing in the news. But other than that, I think my expectations, I think that definitely plays into what people expect out of a movie, because they knew there was a Ghostbusters movie being made. And once they found out it was going to end up being a reboot, I think that's when a lot of people's attitudes changed. But
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot to this to chew. Troy and I have talked about this before, that I honestly think it's going to take, at an academic level, another 20 or 30 years before you can start honestly pulling bits of it apart and trying to talk honestly about what was going on. Because every time you try to look at one point, you bump your shins into 8 other things, and you're trying to figure out, should you make them part of the conversation or not? Or so, like I said, easiest for me is just, at the end of the day, I was like, if a whole bunch of new people got introduced to Ghostbusters through this movie, and it wasn't a small amount. I don't know that it was a huge amount, but I don't think it was an inconsiderable amount. Then perfect. That's at a minimum what we could have hoped for. And Troy's mentioned this before too. This movie did at a minimum what we needed it to do, which was to really bolster the franchise. You know, set the way for new movies and TV shows in a way that merch just wasn't going to do it, right? Like,
it really reopened the door. Yeah.
And I mean, I think we saw that at FanFest, even just hearing Jason say thanks to Paul, you know, like, you know, you kind of got in front of this and you ran over by the bus for us, and you know, kind of took one for the team, and just to see where that's gone. But, you know, I did want to kind of just focus on some of the more positive aspects of the movie, like
totally
things that really went out of their way and I thought were done so well. And, you know, I had one of our friends in our local Midland Empire Ghostbusters, you know, we're a nonprofit group here and we do a lot of the charity events, and one of the guys isn't a huge fan of it, and a few of the guys are just kind of like, yeah, you know, no opinion here or there. But, and I'm like thinking, if you think of this movie as a live action real Ghostbusters, because that's where Katie the writer's coming from, then you really can start to see that from a different light, because a lot of the jokes, a lot of the style of humor in there really kind of plays more to that animated stuff. And it's just because it's what they know. And I just think if people stop and reassess it or look at it through a different lens, and they might just appreciate it more, right? It's never going to be the first movie. That first movie was unreal, right? I don't, you know, had that not been made when it had been made, like even if we think about had it been made with Belushi, imagine the roller coaster ride that could have been. And imagine a Ghostbusters 3 in the 90s. When we review movies, we think about, like, if you've seen, you know, anything post Independence Day, right? What would that movie have looked like just with the CGI? Some of it's aged well, some of it hasn't. You know,
the Sandler, Farley, Chris Rock version that was so close to happening in the 90s was real. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we've been disappointed by that. It's possible, but I think some of the things about Answer the Call was just the fact that they took the jargon and, you know, they really ran with that. And I think it just felt like that Dan Aykroyd level of commitment to the jargon and getting things right on there and kind of explaining that. And then even if you've seen the behind the scenes stuff, right, as someone that loves film, I've watched every minute of every bonus video that came with all the DVDs and Blu-rays and everything, just to kind of see what was going on with it. And you see them explaining the real actual physics of what a proton pack would look like and a cyclotron and how all that would work. And you're like, they really cared about doing things in a form that would be genuinely scientific, and wanted to represent that well. And I think that's another thing that gets lost because people are just so focused on the movie not being what they imagined it to be.
Yeah, that's always a tough one too, because by that point it was like 30 years of people wishing and daydreaming about what the movie would be. It was never, ever, ever going to be any for anybody. Like everybody was going in and 100% not going to get the movie that was in their head.
Phantom Menace. Yeah, it's a Phantom Menace scenario. Like honestly, it was like a Kobayashi Maru where they had a no-win scenario where it was like, okay, we can't please all the fans. We can't make this a big commercial popular success. We can't appease all of the people that have turned this into a political battleground, which we didn't expect in the middle of our production. But you're right, Justin, they're focusing on the details. They're focusing on like, okay, we're going to bring in an MIT professor and we're going to make sure that whatever Holtzman is saying actually has some sort of, even if it is fantastical, even if it is fictional, there is some sort of pseudoscience to it so that it sounds real. It's not just, the Star Trek technobabble. So they really poured their heart and soul into that. Yeah, they made sure that there were something that we had never seen before in a Ghostbusters movie. There were iterations of the technology. So you see them go from this giant shopping cart proton pack all the way down to the thing that they wear on their backs. And that was cool to see that they start with a prototype and they work their way through it. So that the gear, and knowing that Paul Feig is a big gearhead too, that he loves all the gadgets and all that kind of stuff, totally makes sense. But effects
took a huge jump. The ghosts took a huge jump.
Totally. They did the LED lighting on all of the ghosts so that there would be that interactive light with all of the things around them in the actual tangible space so that the animators could then work with that. And so they really did their homework on that. But I want to go back to something you said about it being a real Ghostbusters episode, because if you look at the movie in that light, and then you go watch a couple episodes of Real Ghostbusters, particularly like in the third season and beyond, the influence is very apparent and very clear of Real Ghostbusters on this film, because for the longest time I was trying to explain Holtzman. I'm like, oh, she's a Doc Brown. She's a millennial Doc Brown. She's kind of crazy, wild-eyed scientist, right? But then when you watch Egon in Real Ghostbusters, you realize, no, she is Real Ghostbusters Egon Spengler, just with a little bit more of that kind of like hyperactive personality. It's the new age Spock, but also working on this and fiddling with this. And no, I can't help you because I'm working on this invention that's in the background. And like that really sold for me. And then it also put into context one of my biggest complaints about the movie, which was that I love Robert Yeoman's cinematography. Wes Anderson films, he's done so many amazing things. The Wizard, a near and dear movie to my heart, which is really stupid, a big commercial for Nintendo, but the cinematography is gorgeous. Robert Yeoman, it just knocks out of the park. But then you see this film and it's that big oversaturated F-16 sunny day. Everything is bright and shiny and happy. The same way that they shoot comedies now for anything. Bridesmaids is shot the same way as whatever the movie is that just came out last week. Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar. It's all bright, shiny, happy, saturated colors. And it was really disappointing until that analogy came through, and I was like, oh, he made it like a cartoon. It's a big Saturday morning cartoon. Of course the reds are super red and saturated. Of course all of the skies are bright blue and beautiful. And I think once you start to put things under that lens, you start to appreciate the movie in a different way. Much like when you watch Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I know everybody's like, oh no. But same thing, if you put that through the lens of it was supposed to be a B sci-fi movie from the 1950s, where the original films were 1930s serials, you look at it and you go, oh, of course, that's why they did this. That's why they had the nuclear element in the beginning and they nuked the fridge and all these things that everybody complains about. It starts to make sense. You start to see the purpose behind it, I guess I should say.
Yeah. I mean, like Aliens is no more ridiculous of a thing to talk about than, Jesus and all that stuff. So it's, just
totally.
Space Jesus.
That's what I always
basically.
say. Jesus.
But like you were saying with the lens, that's the thing. When I saw the movie, I didn't really like that they all had. And this is like one of the small things I didn't like. It's not like when I say I don't like it, I didn't rage about it or think about it while I was smoking cigarettes, staring off into the distance or anything. I just kind of was like, no, I don't care for that part. But
Morrissey playing in the background, like, are you okay? We're worried about you, man. Are you okay?
No, I'm just. Do you have any more Cure records? But they're side weapons, right? I didn't like that at first. I was like, why you already have a proton pack and a trap. I don't like this. Then you think about the real Ghostbusters toy line, and I'm like, oh, this is actually fucking cool. I like this.
The Ghost Chipper makes sense as a toy, right?
Yes.
Totally.
All that stuff.
I had a street sweeper that was a ghost catcher. Like, okay, yeah, everything's a possibility.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff designed for the movie, I think they literally sat down and had the conversation, which was, do we try to emulate or homage the original? And then everybody's just automatic. Like, people are going to compare everything we do to what was in the original one. So should we just not try something our own way, a little different? Because if they're going to compare them, we might as well just do what we want to do, sort of thing, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. I did mention I am English may not be what I'm speaking right now, but like if they had tried to replicate the proton packs but updated them or made them different or something like that, or if they tried to redo the Ecto using another old caddy or something like that, everybody would be like, oh, you were just trying to do the old one and you didn't do it as well. I mean, if you're going to take that kind of comparison flack, you might as well just make it your own thing. And that's what they did, right? Like again, rather than trying to do the old caddy, they found an entirely, a different ambulance hearse type vehicle to. Yeah,
but
again, they took flack.
Like again, the heart was in the right place. They're like, well, we'll pay homage to the original film by getting 1984 caddy so that it.
Yeah. Yeah, the proton packs weren't completely redone. They did roll out a couple of new pieces of equipment, and Ferris Fair, they did the same thing. Ghostbusters 2, let's try to put a couple more fun things out there. Sort of uniforms. They're like, well, I mean, we're not going to put them in leather X-Men outfits. We're going to put them in jumpsuits, but let's design our own jumpsuits. And I honestly think as time goes on with this movie, the haters are just going to fall to the background. It'll be like any other movie. I think it's just going to slowly, it'll find the people who like it, and the people who don't will just move on. And so, which means you give it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and it'll just grow into having its own natural following. And all that decisions they made to make original stuff will work in there for more and more and more and more and more, because it is inherent to the new movie. It's not some knockoff of the original movies. Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, when you see how Rowan is just a real Ghostbusters villain, right? I mean, it's a little darker, obviously, with the suicide, but we didn't really have the human villain as the protagonist in the first movies. I mean, you have the tension of the mayor's assistant in Ghostbusters 2, and obviously Walter Peck, which you get a little bit in Answer the Call, but the focus is that the villain is human and is trying to do things. So, I mean, that was a huge leap in change as well. And I think a lot of people didn't even stop to think about why they didn't like it. And maybe that was uncomfortable for them in film form, right? If you didn't watch the cartoon, maybe you didn't know any better. Maybe you weren't open to comparing it.
Why does this guy hate the Ghostbusters? I don't understand. He's in a diner sketching the Moogly with sharp teeth, and you're like, why does he hate the Ghostbusters?
I mean, to follow what you guys are saying, he is more of a cartoon villain, though. Yeah. Right. Zool and Vigo. I mean, they're weirdly over the top and stuff like that, but they're not cartoonish in any way, shape, or form. Like they were designed to be kind of strangely, supernaturally menacing. Rowan was beginning to end. Just like cartoony, right? Literally started as a cartoon, and then just grew into a giant cartoon of destroying buildings.
Dan Aykroyd looking cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So.
Yeah, I guess for me, there's a few criticisms I have of the movie, and for me, all the cameos I didn't really feel were necessary. I just feel like that distracts you from what's going on with the heart of the movie. I appreciate the fact that they wanted to have everyone involved in some shape, but I think that when you see those people, you're more disappointed they're not who you know them to be and love them.
They're not active, they're passive. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I agree with that to some extent. Bill Murray, you kind of just wanted to see him do more and have funnier stuff to say, but like, I love Dan Aykroyd's cameo still. I mean, it's cheesy and stuff, but it's like, it works. I just like it. It makes me smile.
But Dan Aykroyd's cameo also gives you that like multiverse vibe that, is open table now. I mean, really, the MCU has opened up to people to not be like, hey, we need to think so linear about everything. Like, we're already talking about multi-dimensional gods appearing from a portal on a roof of a building. So I mean, if we're going to get weird, let's get weird. So I think that's a big piece to that as well. And I just love how, Dan's character clearly knows what's going on. And so, I always was like, how do you make this movie make sense with the original universe? And then IDW is like, we're going to work with Cryptozoic and we're going to throw out that Men in Black Ghostbusters mashup. And you're like, you guys stole my idea.
Yep, that's just what I was thinking too. I was about to say I just watched Men in Black like last week too.
The biggest Sony properties, like, right? How do you eliminate all that with a neuralizer? It's easy.
Yeah,
it's a one line in a movie.
They're like, we're gonna cross over Men in Black with 21 Jump Street, and you go, I don't hate it. Not what I had in mind, but okay.
Yeah, like the guy who's doing the Fast and Furious movies talking about crossing over with Jurassic Park, and you're like, I mean,
I want to pose a question to you guys, because I always like to hear other people's opinions on this. And Chris and I have talked till we're blue in the face about it. But given that how Paul Feig was active online, was engaging with fans throughout the entirety of production, was completely had his finger on the pulse of all of the conversation that was happening online about the movie and all of the controversies and things like that. Chris said, I think we would have been better off if we didn't know anything about the movie. I would also argue, do you think that this movie would be better if they were kind of operating in a void and didn't acknowledge all of the stuff that was happening outside of wherever the sound stages in Boston were that they were filming? Because there are things in that movie where I go, oh, that's just a direct response to the stuff that was happening on Twitter to them at the time of production, where it's like, no, the Ghostbusters need to be heroes. Like, forget making them have to be frauds and having to like get arrested at the end of the thing. And like, you can tell that they were just trying to find some way to comment upon all of the things that were happening to the production itself within the movie. Like, if they would have just operated in a void, if they would have done what Jason Reitman is doing with Ghostbusters Afterlife, and say, no, I'm going to make my movie. I'm going to tell my story. Do you guys think that it would have been a better film, that there wouldn't have been those things that people bump on, and would have not made the people that were so vocal on Twitter just even bristle because like, oh, they're engaging, like you're engaging with the trolls. Okay, let's see. Let me take some notes. I'm going to talk about this online. Do you think that distracted them? Do you think that would have maybe enhanced the experience of the film?
I mean, I think Paul Feig and knowing like his heart is, as far as representation goes, and not wanting to just, have everything be the predominant white male Hollywood propaganda machine that we've all grown to love and hate for whatever reason. I think he wanted to be in tune with that, but I think his misstep was that all the amazing content they released should have been a book that came out after the fact. All that behind the scenes stuff, because what that did is that eliminated anything for us to collect, even, love or hate the movie. It's still a movie about filmmaking. There still could have been a great book about filmmaking that I would have loved to have seen.
Yeah.
And on this, I will say that I never really dabble in Reddit much, but I, when Answer the Call is coming out, I found a breakdown of Answer the Call that leaked onto Reddit that was 90% accurate. And, I remember kind of being disappointed by hearing some of that, for like example, like the ghost jumpers that they see on the TV, seeing that on there. But I think they would have done a much better job to just release the little bits, or, just release the content, but don't engage with those people. Because I think that negativity just made this way more out of proportion than it should have been. And I know that he was just defending his cast and crew and everything they're working on and trying to justify that. And I think that goes a long way. But yeah, I just don't see their having had a better way to do that without just completely disengaging from the wide audience, right? It would have been, I hate to mention them, but the band Fall Out Boy, they're on the soundtrack, but they broke up for a number of years and came back, and they just released an album. No one knew they released an album or had been in the recording studio. Could you imagine what this movie would have been like had no one even known it was being made until they announced the trailer? Like, that would have eliminated so much backlash, and they'd have been like, you did what?
And so less stress on them too. Like there's one line that I always fixate on, because I watched the film with my daughter. My daughter loves it. She makes me skip over some of the spooky parts. That's okay. But there's one scene where, you know, after they take the YouTube video and they put it up online, and one of the comments says, "Ain't no bitches gonna hunt ghosts." And that's a direct response to what was happening to them while they were shooting the movie. So they, you know, real time are rewriting this as they're going. And it takes me out of it because it's like, oh, well, this is kind of, it brings back all the stuff that we had to deal with back in 2016. But also, like,
interestingly, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted a quick note about that. Paul Feig on the commentary with Katie Dippold claims that was not a response to the online stuff, but
they said
it feels like it is.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I'd love to see the original script, which they've never released either, just to kind of see. But also, it's one of those things that in the movie that is now introducing new generations, new audiences to Ghostbusters. It's the awkward one that I have to have with my small daughter. Like, what does that mean? And I have to be like, ask me again later. Ask your mom. You know, like I don't have to deal with this with a 3-year-old.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think, you know, if they would have been heroes, if there would have been, because one of the biggest draws to Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters, was it was aspirational. You see that as a kid, no matter what age you are, you want to be a Ghostbuster. They're heroes, they're rock stars, they get out of their Ecto-1, everybody's cheering for them. Huge applause. You think, oh man, I want to be like them. I want to be Peter Venkman. I'm the coolest Ghostbuster. And then in this, I think if that same audience would have seen this and seen that the Ghostbusters were rock stars and everybody loved them, and they come out of that rock concert and she goes, "We're the Ghostbusters," and goes, "Yeah," and they're just heroes from that point forward, I think it would have been a totally different movie. And I think they wouldn't have, if they wouldn't have fixated on the need to respond. And I understand why they had to respond to it. You obviously don't want to turn a blind eye to it, but yeah, that's the one thing that I came away from rewatching it to talk to you guys about, was it's like, if this didn't have the time capsule of what was happening in 2016, it would also be a totally different film. Sorry, Chris, I stepped on you. What were you saying?
No, you didn't say it. I mean, my point is your point, which this movie had an uphill fight on several fronts. Like, I think this movie could have been made like flawlessly and perfectly, and it still would have had a fight, you know, to I don't know, get 6 out of 10 on IMDb or whatever it is. Like, some of it's just bad luck, timing. You know, being made in the middle of a growing culture war that's still ongoing.
At the beginning of the culture war, like Ghostbusters was the
right there
for it, and it's like,
the Sony thing.
Proton packs. Can I not be in the middle of this right now?
The Sony hack put stuff that honestly should have been just behind the scenes business stuff right out in front for everybody to opine on. Again, I think maybe just because if the news cycle never ends, it became very clear that there was even after the Sony hack, a kind of a war between you know, Feig, who was tapped to get the movie made, and the people who put the originals out as to how this thing should play out. That's never going to end well. Like I said, that's an uphill fight no matter how you look at it. But the one thing it's got going for it, that you could never take away from it, even like if it had not happened, and 2016 came and went, and somehow, you know, Jason came forward with his script, and everybody, that's a great idea, let's make that, and it's a proper 3. The thing is he's going to make a movie, and I'm curious, he may be able to do it, but I don't think it's as a strong an introduction to what a Ghostbusters movie is than 2016 was.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people saw 2016 and got, you know, an intro to what the first movie is like. We all saw the first movie, we all saw the second movie, and if we had to wait and saw the third movie makes sense. But the third movie is built upon stuff from the first movie and the second movie. So unless you're a kid whose family is like, oh, I love these movies, you should watch these movies too, a large chunk of mainstream cinema goers not going to be well versed in Ghostbusters. And I'm curious to see, like, did Jason make it so it could stand alone on its own if a 10-year-old sits down and sees it, or did he luck out? Did 2016 lay out the groundwork for if you know nothing else about the original movies, at least you've got a sense of what ghostbusting is, and or the 2016 spurred you to then go back and watch the other ones.
Kind of like how Amazing Spider-Man made Spider-Man Homecoming that much sweeter. Like you saw that movie and you realized, oh, I wish this was connected with the MCU. I wish that this was happening. And but younger audiences saw those first two films and still loved those first two Amazing Spider-Man films. But then when Homecoming came out, like that's, you know, it made it that much better of an experience because you had kind of seen where things could go, and now you're seeing where they are going to go. That sort of sliding doors thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got a great point there, Chris. I mean, if
I manage one every once in a while.
And delivers the point that it taught kids what ghostbusting is, right? So they don't need to see the old two movies to go see this because they're going to say, well, we know what a proton pack is. Yeah, we know what a ghost trap is. If they're familiar with that, right? Hopefully they go back and watch those and enjoy them. But, you know, people are going to go see this movie and have to watch them before or after and kind of get a foundation of where things are. But I love how it just makes it easy to pick up and walk into a movie, just like that Spider-Man comparison. I mean, it's perfect for it, right? We didn't need a third introduction to Spider-Man. We don't need a third going into business movie, or a fourth at this point, right?
You don't need another origin story. Now you can just pick up and you assume that the audience knows a certain amount of information. You can go from there. Yeah.
I don't think it's any coincidence that after Answer the Call came out, availability of Ghostbusters across multiple streaming platforms went right up. Prior to that, it was kind of here and there, and they were signing like on again, off again exclusives with like Netflix and something like, and you had to do it's up, oh, it's down, oh, it's up. Right now, the average household has access to at least one streaming platform that has the original movies, right? Like, so like I said, thanks to Answer the Call, I think there's not only that, I think there's a whole bunch of kids that were like, you know, young and had, you know, went in with the young open hearts to see the first one that are now, you know, teenagers that are looking for more complicated stuff or looking for stuff.
Enter Jason Reitman. That's his bread and butter. You know,
it is, yeah.
Your coming of age stories with teenagers having to deal with the world on their shoulders and
Ghostbusters
family and
it's hip. You know, I mean, it's not Star Wars level saturation, so it's still kind of hip to wear a Ghostbusters T-shirt and stuff like that. And yeah, I think, like I said, I think had Answer the Call not come along, the number of people that's the newer generations of kids that saw the old movies would have been incredibly low, really low, which then begs the question. Jason's not a dum-dum. He knows after 35 pushing 40 years, you come out with a third movie, you kind of do have to talk as if the audience may not have seen the originals, could have altered it for him. Like I think that might be why, honestly, one of the reasons that he's thankful for Answer the Call is, we couldn't have counted on, you know, some Mattel action figures and IDW to train up, you know, a movie going audience, the largest part of a movie going audience, mainstream audience, to go see this third movie.
And you don't have to do another origin story. You don't have to. You can do a sense of discovery in this one where it's like the Ghostbusters already existed. You know, Answer the Call had to start from scratch, and you had to see how they came to, which again, going back to Justin's whole point, sorry, man, we just are veering off on a tangent here. But one of the things that I love about that film is that it does show their origins. It does show that they were kids who grew up, and one of them had a paranormal experience and wanted to investigate this and wanted to find ways to discover ghosts. And then you see how they do end up creating their technology to capture the ghost because they need to capture the ghost to prove the existence of ghosts. It's not a business venture. Like it's kind of fun to see that happen, but that's not exposition that Ghostbusters Afterlife is now hamstrung with. They don't have to deal with like, okay, we have to teach you that people don't think ghosts are real. And we don't have to teach you what a Ghostbuster is. We don't have to show them going to business. Like, all of this has happened, and now this story can occur. So it's interesting.
We saw it in the teaser, which is the old YouTube video of like literally that bit between Rudd and the kids is the little bit of exposition for people who may not have seen the originals, which was, back in '84, there were these guys, and they did this big thing, and now people kind of forgot about them. But yeah, they used to run around and shoot ghosts, and people are like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I saw that. I know what the shooting ghost part is because I saw Answer the Call. And if they had not seen they're now going to leave this third movie going, I kind of want to fill in some blanks. I'll go back and see it.
Now, how everybody forgot that ghosts exist. Like I get, okay, yeah, the UN was bombed in the 80s and things like that happened. Like, okay, you forget about that, but the existence of ghosts was forgotten. Anyway, just kidding.
Yeah, is Stay Puft not on that YouTube video?
Yeah.
Someone had to record that.
All the people who ran away in Columbus Circle that there are first person accounts of running away from this giant 50-foot marshmallow man.
In the second movie, how does no one remember?
Yeah, those are all cease and desist from the Stay Puft Marshmallow Company. That's our copyright.
Yeah,
that's
it's a cover up by the Stay Puft.
Good for them for enduring, though. Good for that company for rebranding and picking themselves back up. And
I like to pretend that in 1995, 96, you could go to the 7-Eleven, go to the magazine rack, pick up yourself a copy of like PC World or whatever magazine in its plastic bag, and it comes with a CD, and the CD is all the cool videos off the internet on one disc, and there in amongst tiny 350 by whatever videos of exploding whales and amazing basketball shots is a 15-second piece of news footage of a giant marshmallow guy walking. Like, it's just lost to the background noise of the internet now.
Yeah.
Exactly. I gotta say, Alec, looks like you're gonna jump in there.
No, go ahead.
Oh, all the merch though that this gave us, right? And not just the merch for the movie itself, but we got the film score on vinyl for the original film, right? We've got the second film score getting ready to come out.
Yeah.
And I've got a few things here I'll just show off. Obviously got the Target edition Blu-ray that everyone has, right? I think everyone, I chose that one because it had the additional behind the scenes footage. That's more appealing to me. But the Japanese import, because the box of this thing is amazing. And
I was so bummed we didn't get that here. That was so awesome. Yeah.
I paid a lot
all the cool
on eBay, but it's amazing. Well, they always do.
Weird. It's almost like Japan just took the movie at face value instead of like fighting one another about it on the internet.
But I mean, they even released the film score for the new movie on CD and vinyl. I didn't get the record, but having that on record, like that's the stuff we want right here, right?
Yeah.
We have a vinyl market right now, and that's the resurgence there for physical media, just for collectors, the nostalgia of it. And I'm looking forward to collecting all the things from the new movie. But had Answer the Call not come out and done that, right, would they have even bothered doing the original movie film scores on vinyl like that, right? That was always kind of
not early, at least.
Yeah, you had to go get that on the down low off the internet. You're like, I want the film score, so I'm going to go to somewhere and gather it. And I'm like, I would pay for it if I could, but you don't have a way for me to pay for this. So,
and it acted as the test pancake for this new movie now too. They saw what worked and what didn't work in 2016. The partnerships, look at Walmart getting all of these exclusives and Target getting all of these exclusives and things like that. But it's. They now know that we're going to buy that soundtrack on vinyl for the next movie. So we should make sure that there's a vinyl release, even if it's through Mondo and it's limited. Like, we should make sure that that's out there because the collectors will want that. The packaging in Japan, like a perfect example, the steel books, things like that, all of that merch that the licensing and consumer products people had mapped out for 2016 and saw like this sold, this didn't sell. Think of what they're doing now with Ghostbusters Afterlife, going like, okay, so this sold, let's do more of that.
Yeah.
This didn't sell, we don't have to worry about that.
Everybody
is the big question mark.
It's a big question mark. Everybody forgets that corporations the size of Sony, there's an actuarial element to how they make decisions, right? Answer the Call generated a pile of data for Sony to decide what worked, what didn't work. If it didn't work, how should it maybe have been tweaked to work better?
Demographic to target.
Right? Like it's just all that stuff is now being fed in. And I mean, it's paid off. I mean, in the 5 years between Answer the Call and now, the amount of stuff based on the original movies.
And you got to know that paid off for them everywhere, though. I mean, imagine how they use that data for Into the Spider-Verse, right?
Totally.
They use that data across everything that they're doing, because there was some stuff that came out and I bought a lot of it. I've kept a decent amount of it. Some of the toys I sold to my brother there, or I guess really just gave, but I mean, I still got a proton pack for one of the little guys.
He was like, I paid good money for those. Thanks, man.
Like $50. And, I would like to say thank you because Holtzman is pretty rare these days on eBay. It's not the only one, but.
No, but I've got a lot of the rest of the stuff, and it's still an important piece of time, and all the information they gathered from that, like, they're able to take that and sell us things that, that we really want and avoid that. But, if Coke is listening, and that they've probably got way better things to do, and sponsored by RC anyway, at least that's their ongoing joke, is with these freestyle machines, they could easily do, every AMC theater I've ever been to now has the freestyle machine.
Yeah.
Hi-C Ecto Cooler is a freestyle exclusive for AMC theaters, right? That'd be a good way to generate foot traffic and ad revenue for them.
People into the theaters, totally.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Or any other theater chain for that matter, right? You have that option there. So it's real easy to do that. Those are basically like print cartridges. It's, low overhead to make some of those, and you don't even have to do a physical release if you don't want. Sell it for the movie viewing, and then,
it's not hard to get me to spend money on anything that's marketed as Ghostbusters. Anything, you slap that logo on anything and I'll fucking buy it. And I mean, a lot of us are the same way. You don't even have to put the logo on it. It can be vaguely reminiscent of Ghostbusters, like the slime that you can buy at Baskin Robbins now.
I was thinking the same thing.
I want to get a jar of that, even though it's not marketed as Ghostbusters. I'm like, it's clearly Ghostbusters, and there's Baskin Robbins in the new movie, so I have to go buy a jar of that.
The number of microbrew places that have come up with a Ghostbuster adjacent name and the no logo that have sold piles of their beer to people.
Yeah.
I think if we came back in another 5 years, I'm curious to see if that's enough time passed that they might start letting Answer the Calls come back into the come out and play a bit more in terms of merch and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think 5 years is a little too soon.
Yeah, they're focused on the original, the OGBs, because they want to be reinforcing for Ghostbusters Afterlife. They don't want to have any confusion in the marketplace now. Of like,
remember,
is this the sequel to that movie? I don't get it.
This should have been last year, and so OGB should have been out of the way and left 5th anniversary clear for Answer the Call. But I still feel 5 years.
Yeah,
might not have been enough. I think mostly what it would have done is instead of celebrating Answer the Call or letting the people who liked Answer the Call have fun, it just would have opened the floodgates to shouting match again. But 10 years, which actually, if you're a fan of Answer the Call, that's a sucky time to ask them to wait. But I like to think that, 10th anniversary.
Well, Afterlife will come out, and everybody that wants to hate on something will have a new thing to hate on. It's the Star Wars model. It's like, what new Star Wars movie is out that I can hate on? And now all of a sudden, this one is
split the hate vote across several things.
Yeah, it's for Jason saying, "Hey, man, thanks for taking the bus head on for us here." Poor Jason's gonna get his own thing too, where it's like, "Well, why wasn't it this? And why didn't it have these things? And I hate this." Now I really appreciate Ghostbusters Answer the Call, but yeah.
If we look into that though, and you talk to people about the new movie, like set your expectations, watch some Jason Reitman films before you go see this movie, because it's going to be drastically different than anything you can imagine if you're not familiar with his work. And his work is amazing. It's heartfelt. I mean, I remember going back and seeing Thank You for Smoking in theaters and saying, Jason Reitman, I'm like, is that Ivan's kid? And then you look it up later and you're like, Ivan's son is a director too? Okay. And like you watch that movie and you laugh and you're like, oh, okay. That's a whole other thing. And if you can find that balance of heart and comedy, I think we've got something really special coming to us.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Like you were saying with the
dad's influence in. Oh, sorry, Alec, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I literally just sum it up. I want Extreme Ghostbusters Plasma series. Move along. You go for
yes. Extreme Ghostbusters is anything at this point. Like you guys had Steve Perry on. I wanted to be like, hey, tell that guy to record some commentaries, even if we're not going to get it on DVD or something. But
right, yeah.
Put it on Blu-ray.
The one thing else I just want to say, like with Answer the Call, like the highest compliment that I can pay for it is it's hit that like Shawshank Redemption type whatever that mode or gear is that you have, where when you see it on TV, no matter where it is, you will click over to it and you will watch it. And Answer the Call has become that for me. Like it's on TBS and sci-fi and a whole bunch of channels all the time now. So you will catch it midstream or at the end of the movie, and I'll go watch it. And that's like, to Chris's point, I think in 10 years, I think people are going to realize that like, it's a fun movie. Like, it's fun. It's good to have on in the background. It's one of those things you can watch and you can enjoy. And if you're not carrying all of the fan baggage with it, it's not that big of a deal.
And then the other piece we haven't even talked about is how much the video game influenced this movie, right? Because all the proton wrangling where you're not trapping ghosts, that whole like final act, the big montage feels right out of a video game, right? You really you're in there playing as the character, and it harkens right back to the video game where you're not trapping the whole time. You're doing some other things and you've got other weapons to try and other technology. And it really feels like, they took these influences and it didn't pan out how they wanted to, but I think their hearts were in the right spot, and it's still fun enough to be something that I'm not going to be like, oh, if that's on, to your point, I'll watch it. Or I'll even be like, you know what? I haven't seen that in a little while. I'll go ahead and throw that on.
Right.
Yeah. And a sign of the times. I mean, video game narrative is a common theme through all of storytelling now. You watch any movie and then you get to the third act, you have to fight the big boss. There's a big battle. You have to find the way to win, and then you save the day. There are courses now. The course that I'm thinking of is called Nintendo Narratives at the school that I went to. And they talk about that, like the influence of video games on all of filmmaking as a whole. So yeah, of course, you watch Ghostbusters Answer the Call. It's not going to be the same 1984 Ghostbusters because it's a whole different audience that has different expectations for what a film can and should be. And for everything that Paul Feig and Katie Dippold and everybody that was involved in the film, they were trying to make this like the next generation's Ghostbusters. And I think that's why they wanted to create its own thing that they could kind of hand over and pass the torch to them with. And same thing. So they knew that like they wanted to have the big fight in Times Square where they were, they were using the shotgun, they were using the ghost chipper, they were using the proton bombs. Holtzman had the surprise thing that she forgot about, which everybody always points to as their favorite moment in the movie because it's such a great payoff for Holtzman because she gets her own moment, her own time to shine. And it's the music is great, the imagery is great, the gadgets are all great. But that particular moment that everybody points to that they love would not have happened in a movie from the mid 80s to the late 80s. Like there's you would never really have that moment of like, well, now this character has to have their arc and this character has to have their arc. Like Marty McFly gets to the end of Back to the Future and he saves the day, but he doesn't really learn anything. Maybe he, learns a few things, but he doesn't have to have that moment of like, this is my, so.
They tried to sneak a little bit of that in there with him, learning not to be offended when people call him chicken basically.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of a little bit of it. It's forced in there.
But yeah, and again, and that happened in the later movies too. Like that was like, hey, look, we're coming into the 90s where every character has to have an arc. So yeah.
And you look at Holtzman, right? That whole arc is like the Ghostbusters version of Lara Croft, right? And you've seen so many iterations of that, but dual pistols coming out and like just owning the scene. And I think that's another thing that people forget is we've been lucky that all of us on right now have had the chance to see how film and cinema and movies and entertainment has just grown and adapted and changed in a call and response constantly. And, like we're at the age, like some of the very few people still that are spending a lot of money that, I remember the days before the internet was widely available. So that's a whole other thing to consider when you're looking at how people digest these things.
Yeah. What are some of you guys' favorite movies? I feel like Chris and I, because we're podcast hogs, I feel like that if you listen to our podcast, the Ghostbusters Interdimensional Crossrip is just wall to wall us. But there are redeeming, the Holtzman dual pistols moment is one of my favorites. Like, what are some of you guys' favorite? Like that moment that you point to and you go like, oh, I really like that. I like that one scene or that one shot or one.
There's a couple things, but I think one of the big ones for me would be the intro scene. I like how it actually, it sets up kind of like the other movies do where they're like, all right, here's a spooky event that's going to lead to something else that the Ghostbusters are going to come back to. We do the theme song, throw up the logo, that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I really like Zach Woods in that role. I like the funny bits in the Aldridge Mansion. I love anything in the Aldridge Mansion. I love all of that stuff. And like when they go there and she gets slimed and then starts freaking out, I it's one of the things I laugh out loud every time is when she starts freaking out and says, go surreal into the camera. And then it goes to the office and the guy's just like, you know, I love that too. So
the Charles Dance trying to play that off. Like, who is that? Yeah, that's all the Aldridge Mansion stuff is great. And the way that they did the Gertrude Aldridge ghost, like when, is it Bess Rouse? Is that her name? Chris? I can't remember. From Other Space, but when she comes around that corner, and you can tell that it's a practical person in a wire rig with all of this cool illumination and stuff. Like, that's such a great ghost reveal.
Yeah,
and is very different than the sort of like optical double exposure printing that we were used to from the 80s, where everything kind of felt like the Pepper's Ghost effect, where it was just sort of like a translucent ghost in front of you. It's like, oh, this thing is in that space, and this is how they decided to define that. Yeah, man, I love all the Aldridge Mansion stuff. It's all good.
Same.
Yeah, that's great. I really love the subway ghost, and just seeing them use the proton stream. Like that first time you see that proton stream, you're like, okay, this is really Ghostbusters. Right, you see that, and then they're not afraid to do different stuff, and like the gratuitous use of slime down in there, and you see him like, you know, that he's going to be the third scariest thing on that train. You know, like there's just some good lines in there. I definitely
going to Queens.
Yeah, I love that. What's your iron? Do you know your iron level?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's such a good line.
Yeah,
and another good real Ghostbusters allegory there too. That the slime is always targeting Kristen Wiig's character Aaron for some strange reason. It's Peter Venkman in Real Ghostbusters. Why does Slimer only seem to slime Venkman in the cartoon? Because, well, that's what we saw in the first movie, and it's just a running joke.
Yeah,
that's
a good point. I think one of the valid criticisms is of the ending being a CGI fest, but at the same time, it's still really fun and cool to look at, and it's really well done CGI. So it has that going for it. I like, I get callbacks to The Mask when he has the people doing the dance poses and stuff, and always makes me think of The Mask.
Cuban Pete,
exactly.
One of the things I'd like to see the original script for is just to get a better idea of what they cut out of that end thing, like that giant government, you know, proton throwing truck or whatever that just sat there and never got used.
They were supposed to fire that on Rowan, and it was supposed to be totally ineffective. Or
it seemed it is a bit of a CG fest. I think, unfortunately, a lot of movies these days, and like if you have any amount of sci-fi or horror or what have you, they're going to end as a CGI fest one way or another. I don't even know if you can counter that these days, unfortunately.
Right. I'm okay. I think this one did, like I said, a good job mixing the practical with the CGI, and that's the best way to go these days. I mean, come on, we want some practical effects, and you can enhance a little bit with some CGI, like the slime on Aaron in the Aldridge Mansion is that way. It's like a lot of it was practical, but they added some CGI slime because they didn't get quite the effect they wanted.
Yeah,
it's certainly. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say they enhanced the scene, and that's the thing that this movie does almost perfect, in my opinion, is the natural lighting they use. All the LED lighting they had on the proton wands, all the drone for Mayhem, the ghost, as he's flying around. There's just so many beautiful things about this movie where they're like, okay, how do we make this better for post-production, right? Because I think everyone could agree that with CGI, your biggest thing is that the lighting doesn't react like a normal environment in CGI, right? And that's really hard to get right. And so if you actually supply the necessary lighting up front, it makes the job in post-production so much easier.
I'm also curious, like I want to read that book you were talking about, Justin, the big making of book at some point, maybe 10 years when Chris is talking about that we have that rear view mirror distance on it where we can actually start talking about things pretty honestly and truthfully, because I bet that third act, there's a whole thing where Rowan turns Times Square back to the 1970s, and you see the taxi driver billboard, and you see the Hague and the cigarettes, and like he turns back time in Times Square, and he has the Thanksgiving Day parade balloons from a decade or several decades before the 70s. what was that all about? Like, I feel like there was something else there, and then in the span of rewriting things and figuring things out to maybe end the movie, like I feel like that was such a cool concept that we kind of are ambiguous toward like what that actually meant. Like, we're going to turn back the clock to a darker time of New York City. Why? I don't understand. Like that whole thing was very cool. And seeing that sort of that juxtaposition of like 70s New York with the pilgrims and all of the different ghosts from different time periods, what was happening there? That would have been something cool to explore a little bit further. And maybe they did, and then maybe they decided like, no, we need to set a big montage to AC/DC Shoot to Thrill, so let's start choreographing that, and we'll worry about all the other stuff in the background later. I don't know. I'm very curious. At some point when that big Rinsler making of book comes out, I'm down. I want to read that.
Yeah, even if you hate this movie, just watch the behind the scenes stuff just to see how amazing the filmmaking is on this and how thoughtful it was. I have heard that Neil Casey did have a lot cut out of this film, just as far as the Rowan scenes, in the background around the hotel, around the diner. A number of those scenes just were cut. Just, obviously you write way more than you need to develop backstory. And as you edit a movie, you cut out what isn't critical, right? A movie's going to run your hour, 20 minutes, or hour and a half, and you really need to get to the point and get through it. Even the regular cut of this was 2 hours, which feels pretty long compared to the regular Ghostbusters, the original, right? You feel, okay, this feels like it's a little run out. And then you've got the extended edition, and there's still so much that we still don't know, right? It's almost
there's still like an hour and a half of deleted scenes on that online version too, the Target version that you got. Like, there's so much that was on the cutting room floor. And I think that's because, Paul Feig kind of comes from the Judd Apatow, Adam McKay school of like, well, just go. Let's do like 13 takes of it. Just freestyle it. And they get so much in the can that they can use.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like Ghostbusters 2, right? Obviously, you go in with intentions of something, and the sequelitis that went through was, let's face it, Coca-Cola was trying to sell real Ghostbuster stuff, right? There's it's for-profit industry, right? When you look at it that way and you go, okay, I understand why they made some of those changes. You want it to be a little bit friendlier for families and kids. And that's why Ray doesn't try to roll the ecto and murder everybody, right? Some of that stuff that's cut out of there. You're like, well, let's just kill everybody that's a Ghostbuster. And, and you cut those things out just because it makes sense, right? You're going to tell a certain story a certain way. And regardless of the influence on that, at the end of the day, your finished product is not influenced only by yourself, but the producers, the bankers. There's a lot of stuff going on in these things that we just take for granted. We never stop to assess and think like, that's a lot of pressure to do that. And
you're making a movie for not the audience that you expected. Ivan Reitman went into Ghostbusters in '83 thinking he was making another sort of Stripes Caddyshack movie for teenagers to adults, and then all of a sudden kids latch onto it, which is great because that's what made it the phenomenon that it was. But then you start to realize all of the problematic things for kids. They're smoking, everything is grungy and dirty. We got to soften things up for kids a little bit. And the cartoon did that, so the next movie did that. And then Answer the Call, same thing. It's like, well, we know that kids like Ghostbusters, so we have to make this both entertaining for adults, but also make sure we don't alienate kids. It'll be interesting to see how Afterlife handles that too. It's like they want to be like the original 1984 film, but you still have to kind of keep it. I think it's a PG-13 movie, right? So you gotta keep at least 13-year-olds in mind for it.
Yeah, so we'll see how that pans out. I think they'll do a great job of that. Like I said, I've seen Jason's work, and I got faith in his ability to tell a story while making it funny, but eliminating all the dick jokes that we've grown to love from the first movie. So,
I always have to fast forward over the blowjob scene. I don't want to explain that to my daughter yet. Sorry, that's a quick 10-second skip. That's got to happen.
Go ahead. Yeah, there's no reason to discuss that.
Yeah, that's one of those funny things that people always say about Answer the Call is that they don't like the humor, and the first one they always bring up is the queef joke, and you're like, all right, but come on, there's nothing but dick jokes in the first movie.
Yeah, but a joke here a while ago, it was like one of the biggest jokes in this movie is emasculating a man, saying that he doesn't have his reproductive organ, right? You're like, we call him dickless, and you guys are offended by a lady making a similar style joke in a movie about passing gas, and they're like, it's very interesting what people find appropriate and inappropriate. based on their personal taste.
Yeah, exactly. Like Chris said, it's subjective. It's all subjective. Yeah.
Although I think in a lot of those cases, they're just looking for something to like complain about more than anything. I don't I don't think it's personal taste so much as I will be offended about this because it backs the argument I want to
narrative, yeah,
cling to.
Yeah. So any well, Alec, do you got any final thoughts on your side here?
No, not that I can think of. Just excited to see this next Ghostbusters movie. And then, you know what? I'm glad Answer the Call is made, because now instead of having only 2, I've doubled the amount of Ghostbusters movies in the last 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's
true.
And if you're only going to watch the other 3 way more than Answer the Call, or just the other 2, depending on when Afterlife comes out. It's just, I like everything Ghostbusters. I really like Extreme Ghostbusters. And I know that a lot of people don't, but I'm just like, more Ghostbusters.
But they're wrong.
I'm sold.
They're wrong. Chris nailed it. They're wrong. Extreme Ghostbusters is great.
I love it. What about you? Any other thoughts from you, Justin?
No, but I was going to say with Troy and Chris here, you know, Chris is famous for his final thoughts. So I was going to throw it to him after Troy.
But why? Why am I famous?
This is where I just kick back and relax and let him go.
My final thought, and this came up while we were talking, is because we talked about this before, that playing the role-playing game, Real Ghostbusters lends itself to coming up with scenarios for the role-playing game. And the same goes for Answer the Call. Like, and I understand why no official version was done, but like, why didn't those of us that actually like the role-playing game, why haven't we yet built any resources for Answer the Call for the role-playing game, right? How come we haven't worked out the gear a bit? And how come we haven't worked out, like, the Aldridge Mansion should literally be the training bust for people new to the role-playing game? Because even though you've seen the movie, you know who she is, very little else is handled about her as a ghost. We never see her caught. We never see, you know, don't see a lot of the other house. You don't dig into the history to add more to the story. It is beautifully made for sending a handful of people into a house with a ghost in it to go catch it. So my final thought is, I feel like I need to maybe do some of that. Like, I got tons of spare time, but I don't think it's, I mean, the resources are there to play the role-playing game, and I guess technically anybody could just play Answer the Call or esque type scenarios if they wanted to anyways, if they had a good dungeon master.
Create the Aldridge Mansion. Yeah.
Yeah, but why? I don't know. Maybe we should just work it out so that the materials are out. That's my final thought is long summer coming, you know, fall's coming, Halloween's coming, new movies coming. And Answer the Call, I think, unfairly is going to have to cool its heels for political reasons, corporate reasons. So in the meantime, yeah, maybe a few of us that like the role-playing game need to put our heads together and put some... They did stats. Somebody did put out stats, I think, for the characters.
I think somebody did do character cards, yeah.
And that's where it ended. And I think we should have gone further with it. I think the Aldridge Mansion needs to be written up in the same style, you know, like a 4-pager in the same style as the original role-playing game. Those terrible column layouts and all of that, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, or if you have, puts in all the incidental characters, all the little history that you might manage to dig up. And yeah, just, oh, they don't have their packs. Well, I guess you could do it as you've run out, Ghosts are real, get your equipment, establish yourselves, then you get to go back and bust her officially. Mm-hmm. Yeah, why not? That's my final thought. I've made work for myself. Thanks, guys.
As always.
Homework. No, I think that's great. I mean, I really think that works to carry that role-playing game on and expand that for people. And then, you know, that could bring new people into the role-playing game, right? Oh, they have...
Absolutely.
Right? You know, people are always looking for ways to do things, and hopefully we're through with lockdowns, but, you know, it's a good way to even do, you know, I know a lot of people are still carrying on game nights virtually just because it's a great way to get together, even when you can't all drive together. So that's excellent thought. So appreciate your time, gentlemen. We hope to have you back on soon and chat with you.
This is great.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. This was fun.
Yes. All right. Well, if you guys want to give a shout out with where to find your guys' stuff, if they're not familiar with your show, Go for it.
If you are down with listening to Ghostbusters podcasts for hours every week, then the Ghostbusters Interdimensional Crossrip is the podcast for you. That's for sure. GhostbustersHQ.net is where you can find the Crossrip, or on any of your podcatching app, iTunes, Spotify, the works. We're in all of those, and I'm at Ghostbusters HQ on all of the social medias.
Proton Charging, and at the Crossrip. And I think you and I mostly haunt Twitter more than anything else.
Yeah, mainly Twitter, but Instagram as well. We're jealous of the Frog Brothers on Instagram. You guys have such an awesome presence that it's just we let
I'm the old man. How does this Instagram work?
Oh, I've been trying. With this room with the video store decorations helps a lot. I can just be like, all right, I'm just gonna pull VHS off and model it and take a photo.
I totally want to.
I do like Alex foray into just angering people on TikTok though. I kind of want to go into that too. That seems like fun.
It is super fun. I have so far claimed that Answer the Call is one of the remakes that exist in life that is better than the original. And it has like 45 comments. And actually, you know what? There's like 5 people who are like, oh, I like it. And they're just like, I like that movie. They're not even arguing with me. They're just like, oh yeah, cool. And I posted another saying something about how Last Jedi is the best Star Wars movie and that Rian Johnson can do no wrong. And again, there's some people that are just like, ugh. Like somebody said something about like he wanted to kill me. Like it wasn't a threat on my life, but it was like he definitely wanted to end my life. And like right below that's just somebody like, oh, at least Jedi was my last favorite. But it's still good, you know.
Watch it. Yeah,
lots of wide variety on there. I don't know what my next hot take will be.
The RoboCop reboot was far superior to Paul Verhoeven's original. That's your next one.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes, please do that. That's great. That'd be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing all these videos, so if they run into us, they'll just attack him, and I'll be fine. I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know that guy. He's my brother.
No, it literally says on my TikTok account, if you go to our page from there, our bio says you've been had. So like it should be obvious.
Sure, that's beautiful.
One of the questions we got was comments was, is this satire? And I just said back, good question.
No, it's life. Life is satire.
Right. Oh yeah, that's been a great time.
All right, gentlemen, we'll chat soon. And you guys have a great night. Appreciate your time. It's great seeing you, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye,
Stay
guys.
cool, Chris. Poor Chris.
Thank you.